Hey everybody, happy March and welcome to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I am Jordan Smith. And for those that are not aware, not too long ago, they announced that Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith is having its 20th anniversary. And soon enough, it's going to be released in theaters once again. And that got us thinking, what other movies are also hitting their 20th anniversary this year? Basically, movies that we may or may not have seen that came out in 2005.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, if it's okay, I kind of wanted to take a little moment to honor a couple of recently fallen actors who have I think, in just the past week or so, have have had their time. They've passed away. One of them being Gene Hackman. He who was in, I think, his mid 90s, and I remember him most fondly for playing Lex Luthor in the Superman films of the 70s and 80s. And and that first film, one of my personal favorites, and great great performance by him. And yeah, and so and he was, well, from what I understand, very prolific, and I'm sure this is a major loss to the business, and definitely my support is with his loved ones right now.
Oh, for sure. I can definitely speak for a lot of people when I say losing a loved one is not easy. Uh, and it has been a little while since I've seen the Superman movies from that time, but I do very much remember Reeves and Hackman being two big reasons as to why I think the films did so well, at least the first two. Superman 3 and 4 did not get received as well. But regardless, the two of them really helped get the Superman films and the superhero film genre off the ground. So definitely props to him and the influence he had. And of course, as you said, our prayers are with his family.
And there was one other loss that I was reading up about, that is more shocking, considering this person was only just a few years older than we are, actually. And that is specifically actress Michelle Trachtenberg, perhaps best known for her work on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Gossip
Mhm.
Girl, and the Nickelodeon film of Harriet the Spy. And fondly remember watching her in Harriet, and as well as Penny in the first Inspector Gadget film. And yeah, and I was reading, some of the testimonials, some of the tributes that were published, like in like entertainment tabloid articles, and from some co-actors and such, who said, so they had fond memories of her being such a kind person and very a delight to work with. And I was certainly particularly hit hard by this one because I have nostalgic memories, as I said, of watching her on screen, and as as a kid growing up, and it's something I certainly didn't see coming.
I mean, it's hard to see anything like that coming when it comes to somebody passing away at a young age. Uh, personally wasn't as familiar with her work, but I still understand the significance of what she did and for so many people. And you delivering that little story definitely furthers that point. It's like just because she didn't have an impact on me doesn't mean she didn't have an impact on a lot of other people. And any loss, regardless of how old she was, is still difficult. So our thoughts and prayers are with her family as well. And before we continue, there was actually one more name I wanted to mention because they only passed away a couple days ago.
Yeah,
Their name is George Lowe, I think is how you say it.
yeah,
For those that may not be aware, one of his more recognizable roles was a cartoon character known as Space Ghost,
Oh, yeah.
who I think he had his own show for a little bit, and then he had something called Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where he would have these very interesting interviews with people, like actual people. Um, and because he's a cartoon character, it's probably scripted. But regardless, I've watched a few of those with a friend of mine, and I actually found them pretty enjoyable. So when I heard that he passed, it's like it did come as a shock because I only just in the past year or so really recognized who this guy is and what he did. And now he's gone. It's like, okay, maybe I should go back and see these again. Because now when you see something that somebody worked on and that person is now gone, it holds, not holds, it has more of a different kind of impact, if that makes sense. Like, for example, when Robin Williams was alive and we saw the genie growing up in Aladdin, it's like, oh, this is amazing. He's funny. He's great. And we still see that now, but there's now that bittersweet punch knowing that Robin Williams is gone. And the same thing can be said for Mr. Lowe.
Yeah. So after Robin passed on, did you like watch like one of his films like Aladdin or something else to, like as a commemorative thing?
I did watch a handful of them because Robin Williams was a big influence for me when it came to acting. Genie was definitely one of the most prominent ones that I look forward to watching afterwards. I watched Robots for his role as Fender. When he played Peter Pan in the movie Hook, like those were a good handful of the films I saw growing up that he was in, along with ones like Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, I remember shortly after his death, my brother and I watched his film Dead Poet Society, which was
Mm.
another good one, I think. But yeah, so
In any case, we do miss these actors. We wish nothing but the best for their families. And I don't think they'll ever see this, but if they do, then I would tell them that grieving has no specific timeline. Take as much time as you need.
yeah, yeah, it's totally natural, you know.
Hmm.
Do it as like like I know you said when you eulogized your mom, it's totally okay to grieve. Just let go with the flow, let it flow, you know.
Yep. Trying to hold it in makes it worse later.
Yeah, yeah. But on a higher note, we did have a list of I guess you could say nostalgic 20-year-old movies when thinking about when I was thinking about the fact that they're doing the 20th year Revenge of the Sith reissue, and I had a little list of my own. I don't know, of course, yet what Jordan has written down, but I guess I'll find out now.
Yeah, I got a bit of a list here. The first one I have written down, I didn't write down necessarily because I've seen it, but more so I saw the film that came before it. And this being Sandlot 2.
Hmm.
The second one came out in 2005. I've never seen it, but I have seen the first one a handful of times. But now knowing that this movie is 20 years old, maybe I'll go and see it now. Uh, I, I remember enjoying the first one, so maybe I'll enjoy the second one.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're okay with a more or less carbon copy of the original, I don't want to. I'm not going to discourage anyone from watching it, but to me, honestly, when I watched it, it felt more like a carbon copy of the first, more or less. But if you can still like it on its own terms, I guess that's okay.
Sure. I might see it with a handful of friends. We'll figure that out. And then the next one I only ever saw once or twice, I think, but there's still a lot of it that I remember. And it's an animated movie called Hoodwinked.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
And it was a very interesting film, to say the least, because I feel like it was following a similar idea to Shrek, where they were kind of combining these different fairy tales or nursery rhymes together in this wacky setup. But I still remember that for some reason they had Little Red Riding Hood really good at martial arts or whatever, and the bunny was the villain. They fought near the end, which was kind of funny to me. I don't know why. And then there was one of his henchmen that had a name that he just did not like, and he kept saying, "Please, please change it."
Yeah, yeah.
But go ahead.
It did feel like they were kind of going after like similar formula to Shrek, or combining old familiar fairy tale with modern comedy, and there were quite a handful of um name recognition actors in this one, like Anne Hathaway, Glenn Close, Anthony Anderson, um, a good handful of them. And yeah, I only saw it once. I think it might have been hit or miss, but I do think it was overall pretty good though.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it for sure. I also think Patrick Warburton
Yeah.
was
Yep.
in it. Uh, One thing I would definitely say though is that, especially when compared to Shrek, the quality of the animation is not the greatest I've ever seen.
Mm.
Uh, it doesn't bother me too much, like it doesn't distract me from enjoying the movie, but you can definitely tell what kind of a budget it may have had. But it was still fun. And then I found that a lot of the movies that I have seen that I put on the list that also happened to come out in 2005, a lot of them were superhero films. And pun partially intended, but I began with Batman Begins. I don't think I saw this one too much while I was growing up, because it was that, and then there was The Dark Knight, which I definitely was not allowed to watch as a kid. But I remember at some point we were trying to watch it and I fell asleep as a kid. Maybe I was just tired. But going back on it, it's like I definitely enjoyed it, and Dark Knight is still a fantastic follow-up to it. Uh, Definitely one thing I would have changed is the voice of Batman.
Mm.
Christian Bale definitely did a good job, but that Batman voice that he has just sounded really weird.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what they were going for with that one. I like to think it was like uh, mm, just some kind of way to be dark and dangerous or whatever. I mean, it is mm, it is kind of funny how Will Arnett kind of pokes fun at it as Lego Batman, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. It seems kind of out of place when compared to like the rest of the delivery in the movie, though. But
Oh yeah, and when you have actors like Kevin Conroy or Michael Keaton, it shows that you don't have to drastically change your voice to throw people off as to who you are. You just have to make it subtle, and you can still be threatening that way. Maybe there were other things that they tried and they didn't like, or maybe it wasn't necessarily Christian Bale's idea. Maybe it was the director's idea. But in any case, Batman Begins was a good start to the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. And then the next one kind of ties into the whole Revenge of the Sith thing, because I think they were in theaters at the same time. And this was the Fantastic Four movie, specifically, since there's a few of them now, specifically the one that had Chris Evans as Human Torch and Jessica Alba as Invisible Woman, and so on. There was a little bit of a story here, and I know they were in theaters at the same time because My dad, my sister, and my brother, they all went to see Star Wars, but I was not allowed to see it yet, so my mom took me to see Fantastic Four. Now, oddly enough, I don't think I have the first one on my DVD rack back here. I think I have the second one, but I still very much vividly remember the first one. It had a lot of enjoyable characters. I loved Chris Evans. Just the Human Torch in general, I thought was really cool. Doctor Doom, an enjoyable performance. And I'm sure when Robert Downey Jr.'s version debuts, there's going to be a lot of comparisons between the two. Excuse me. But yeah, I remember seeing this one in theaters. And then it wasn't until later that I found out the reason I wasn't allowed to watch Revenge of the Sith when it first came out is because my dad believed that the image of Anakin burning up in the lava would be a little too much for me. He was probably right about it, because at the time I was only 9, 10 years old, and Anakin was my favorite character, still kind of is. But it's like, it's interesting that we thought of the 20th anniversary Star Wars Revenge of the Sith thing, because then it brought me back to the memory of seeing this other movie instead of it. And now that I've seen both, I would probably say I enjoyed Revenge of the Sith a little more, but Fantastic Four was still an enjoyable experience. And I'm intrigued to see how this new one goes when it comes out. I don't know much about it yet, but I guess we'll see when it debuts. Then this next superhero film, it's not really Marvel or DC. I think this is it a Disney movie? I'm not sure, but it's called Sky High.
Oh yeah, that is Disney. Yes,
It is Disney. Okay. For those that may not be aware, this is a movie from obviously 20 years ago. And the premise, I guess, is that a select few were put on this bus that literally went into the sky where this floating academy was for young superheroes. It's kind of like an X-Men type thing where they have this school for gifted kids. And it focuses around a boy whose parents have super strength and flight, respectively. And it's under the presumption at first that he himself does not have any powers. But then as the movie progresses, I think he discovers that he has the powers of both of his parents. And this is definitely one I haven't seen in a long time, but like with some of the other movies, it excuse me, it definitely still had some memorable moments. Like there was a bully who had the skill to control fire, and he was teamed up with this kid. There was another guy who had super speed. There was this whole scene where it was like a montage of all the abilities that these different kids have. One of them could turn into a guinea pig. One of them could turn into a giant rubber ball. One could turn into something similar to the Thing in Fantastic Four. But that one scene, for some reason, I remember more than most. But I definitely would say I like this movie. I'm bringing it up again. I think I actually will go back and see it again.
yeah. Also, I just noticed looking at the cast list, Bruce Campbell is in it, and if you follow like at least the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, you probably are familiar with the name because he had a small role in each of those 3 films.
Yeah, I think he would appear in one scene in each of them. Like in the first movie, he was the wrestling announcer.
Yep.
In the second movie, he was the
I think it was like a theater ticket guy or something.
yeah, I was trying to think of the official term for it, but he was definitely the guy standing outside the door, preventing Peter from going in because the show had already started.
Yeah.
And then in the third movie, he was like the French restaurant owner, waiter, what have you.
That may be
Which,
the best one.
oh yeah, that was definitely my favorite. I think it's partly because that was the one that had the most screen time and he just rolled with it. But not only was he one of these characters in all the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, but he played a part in some of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man games as well. Because in the first Spider-Man game, based on the first movie, he was the kind of guide slash tutorial person. And honestly, I sometimes pull that game out just to play the tutorial because he was just so funny the whole time. Like, I still remember how he starts the tutorial off. He's like, "Greetings, welcome to the tutorial. Yeah, I know you want to get on with things, beat up the bad guys, do the whole superhero thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, everyone's got to start somewhere." And he would just be really snarky with you. And it was just a real fun experience. In fact, if you play the first level of the game and you find a hint that's also in the tutorial, it's like, here's a tip for when you're on the side of a building. If you press this button while you're crawling, your web zip in the direction you're moving. Of course, you'd know that if you played the tutorial, but I guess you're just cooler than the rest of us.
Oh, sounds like he hit it on the head there.
Oh, yeah, he was a very enjoyable person in both the movies and the games.
Yeah.
And then moving on, this next one, I would still say I enjoy it, but maybe I enjoy it for different reasons than when I did growing up. And it's kind of a superhero-ish film, but it's called The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, I definitely remember seeing this with my mom in theaters because they had these scenes, or whether they were in the movie or just text on the screen that would tell you whether to put your 3D glasses on or take them off. But I actually still have a copy on my DVD rack back there. I thought as a kid that Shark Boy was like the coolest thing ever, and like throwing fire was really awesome, and the different features in this dream world that they went to. It's like, man, I'd love to design a world like that in my head and make a story around that. And I definitely find myself laughing at it more than I used to. It's not that I think it's worse now than it was when I was growing up, but there's just maybe as a grown up, I've got a different perspective on it now.
Sure.
It's like sometimes I'll pop it in just to get a different type of enjoyment out of it. It's very difficult to explain, but I know a lot of people will know about this movie because Taylor Lautner's in it, and a lot of people know him for his role in the Twilight films. But I remember him for Shark Boy because of the fight scenes and that one song he has for some reason, but I thought it was really catchy. It's a fun ride, and in some ways it still is.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was directed by the same guy who made the Spy Kids series, which was one that I got more acquainted with when I was a kid. And yeah, yeah, but I do remember Shark Boy and Lava Girl very, very much having a very similar, really good production value and everything. And yeah, it's more or less nostalgic, definitely.
It's really interesting too when we talk about the quality of this movie or Spy Kids or whatever, because Rodriguez, who directed all these movies, he did a lot of the work himself. He saved a lot of money by doing much of the work on his own. He would still have a staff of sorts, but he was definitely on the front lines a good chunk of the time. So the fact that they came out as good as they did really says something about his skill.
Yeah, anybody who's like like a big buff on like visual effects and stuff, and was like like the kind that you see in these movies or other flashy, what you might call popcorn films. I would definitely recommend, if you get the chance to, on a couple of the Spy Kids DVDs, there is an extra feature called 10-minute film school that, well, that Robert Rodriguez does, narrates, whatever, and kind of explaining his unorthodox approach to production and producing visual effects. And yeah, it's fascinating for sure.
Absolutely. And there was a movie that came out in the past few years that I forget what it was called, but it was also directed by him, but it actually brought Shark Boy and Lava Girl back. It wasn't a Shark Boy and Lava Girl movie, but they were in it. I think it was something called something like We Can Be Heroes, or
Oh yeah, I'm
some,
seeing the title right now. Yeah.
but I haven't seen it yet, and I know they recast Shark Boy. I guess Lautner was busy at the time. But Taylor Dooley, who was Lava Girl, she was back to reprise her role in this film. And I guess Shark Boy and Lava Girl are parents now. Like they have a kid who has both of their abilities. I'm not entirely sure. But it makes me want to go back and see some of Rodriguez's other films. Like I've never seen the Spy Kids films, so maybe I'll go back and watch those. Maybe I'll put in Shark Boy and Lava Girl again.
Yeah.
I know he's done less kid-friendly films like Sin City. I probably won't watch that,
Yeah.
but I recognize that he does put in a lot of work in his films, and the fact that this movie is now 20 years old makes me realize how old I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm even older. Not by a lot, but still.
Sure. Yeah, we're still young.
Yeah. Sort of. Somewhere in between.
Well, the philosophy I like to go by is once you're 21, you stay 21. And the reason I say that is because if you ever come across somebody who just randomly asks how old you are, you can say, I'm 21, because then that can be a very polite way of saying, none of your business. And then I got a couple more here. This was the start of a trilogy. It's not a superhero film, but it's one that I still hold very dear because I saw it all the time with my family. That being Madagascar. It
Yep.
was, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, yep, familiar. Yeah.
Okay. The Madagascar trilogy, I would say, is one of the rarer examples of a trilogy that gets better with each film. Some films, it could be like the first one's good, the second one's great, and then the third one's just really bad, or some other mixture of those. But there's usually one in a trilogy that isn't as well received as the other two. But with Madagascar, I felt like the first one was good, the second one was great, and the third one was fantastic. And the fact that this one came out in 2005, I honestly thought it was older than that. But for 2005, it looks really good. And it's still really funny. I still pop it in every once in a while. Just the scene with the old lady in the Grand Central Station, knowing that she was going to be a much more prominent character in the sequel, just is so funny to me. But I feel like the one thing the third one didn't do that I wish they kind of did and they missed out on this opportunity was that they completely omitted the old lady that beat the snot out of Alex in the first two movies from the third one. It's like if they kept her in, they could have had this whole like versus duel or what have you against with her against Le Capitaine Dubois, who was trying to capture Alex throughout the whole third movie. It's like if these two were to duel against each other or race to see who can get to Alex first, I feel like that would have been absolutely hilarious spectacle.
Yeah. Well, I just have memory of the first film to go off of, but I'll just I guess to each his own opinion, I'll say that.
Oh, sure. Have you seen the second or the third one?
Uh no, honestly, not never.
Oh, we may have to find some time to do that because I have all three.
Okay.
And well, for now, the last one is one that you, Seth, recently watched, but I wasn't able to participate in the end because some things came up. But it's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the live action Narnia film with Liam Neeson as Aslan. I don't I don't remember if I'd seen this one in theaters. I saw the following two in
Yeah.
theaters for
Yeah.
sure, but I definitely just love the first one. There's just something about reading a book or watching a movie that takes place in a fantasy world that I just become so engrossed in. Because you can pretty much make anything you want happen. You can make the land look however you want to look. You can have creatures that don't exist in real life, and you can make them look and act however you want. There's just so many possibilities, and it's just so fun picturing all these things in your head and then seeing this in movie form, especially for 2005, was really well done. I personally love the casting of most, if not all, the characters. I felt that Liam Neeson commanded a very calming and yet threatening presence when he needed to. And there was just, I forget the actress's name who played the White Witch.
Tilda Swinton.
Yes. The way she performed in that film, it's like her facial expression and her tone of voice didn't really change too much, but she tweaked it just enough depending on what she was saying. And it's like, oh, she looks very calm, but she also looks like she can kill you in a matter of seconds if you look at her wrong.
Yeah, I do remember watching it. I think the first time I watched it on DVD at home many several years ago, and being pretty intimidated by when the White Witch would get angry and indignant, and she definitely had that dangerous vibe that you want from a character like this. So yeah.
And the fact that she, I mean, I'm sure most people who know of the Narnia story know what happens, but in case, spoiler, the moment when she kills Aslan was very shocking, especially when I was younger, because it's like Aslan's this very powerful guy who can just make people like start walking away just by glaring at them or roaring at them. And again, he has this commanding presence, and just to see him give himself up for another person, very similar to how Jesus did, and then seeing him get stabbed, it's like, geez, this is very impactful. Like, I understand the parallels between Aslan and Jesus Christ in some ways. So I kind of already expected what was going to happen, but just seeing it happen, the way they shot it, the music, the visuals, it's like made it just very difficult to watch in all the right ways. Because you didn't want to see him die, but you also understand based on the story, that's what he needed to do.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about like the theological, Christian parallels between the universe of Narnia and of course the a lot of the scriptures. And C.S. Lewis has been regarded as one of the most influential, impactful, well, Christian theologians of our time, or all time possibly. And and it's kind of interesting the more I think about it, how, some of these parallels can kind of fly over your head depending, I guess, on your familiarity with the religious scriptures. But uh, some can be more obvious than others, but I- but on its own creative terms, like independent of whatever the religious influence may be, it has a way of appealing, I think, to mm, various types of people. Well, because it's how it's creatively structured and the whole fantasy aspect.
That's definitely one thing I admire about it is that you don't have to be Christian. You don't have to recognize the parallels between that story and this one to understand what's going on in the film or just enjoy it in general. Like it's told in such a way that it can appeal to people of all different types of backgrounds. Like it's still a good story without forcing the message down your throat.
Yeah, it succeeds at that. I would agree.
Absolutely. But that is all the ones I had.
Yeah, yeah, and one of mine, we think we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, or at least you did, was well, Robots by the animation studio that also produced the series of Ice Age films for 20th Century Fox, Blue Sky Studios,
Hmm.
and I think probably the same director as well. And it's a good. uh, Some might say it was a bit on the nose in its message, but it's still in a way, in a good creative way, like, has a good positive message about rejecting conformity and being yourself, that kind of thing. And that mixed with some fun comedic moments and some cool visuals and a star-studded cast. I could go on and on about that. They had Jennifer Coolidge, Halle Berry, Stanley Tucci, of course, the late Robin Williams, Drew Carey, um, Ewan McGregor, probably best known for playing Obi-Wan in the Star Wars prequels.
Yep.
And yeah, yeah. So a lot to appreciate about it, and yeah, it's s- something I think I would probably recommend to people.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend it myself as well. The creativity of the city and how they traverse it alone is a very interesting spectacle. And the fact that they had to animate that frame by frame, I can't imagine the time and effort it must have taken to do that. But what the interesting connection I have with robots is that it was one of the first films I would say I recognized with how some jokes I didn't understand as a kid, like they would fly over my head. But as I grew up watching this movie, I started to pick up on more and more of the jokes. It's like I think Robots is one of the first movies where I really started to grasp that concept.
Yeah, yeah. And then there were a couple of similar concept films about like large families, and there was a sequel to Cheaper by the Dozen, also from 20th Century Fox. A lot of the pretty much all the major actors returned for this one, and they gave one of them a more expanded role, kind of fleshed her out a little bit more. And yeah, and that's probably one thing I remember particularly about the sequel, about Cheaper by the Dozen 2 fondly, is that in the original entry, I felt like this character was pretty much basically just a well, more or less grouchy, smart aleck, um, pretty more or less full of self, which is probably harsh to say because it's a kid, but I feel like in this second film, gave her a little bit more vulnerability, a bit more of a coming of age plot line that I appreciated. It was refreshing to see that. And
I've definitely seen the first one a few times. I want to say I saw the second one at least once because I think that's the one that had Taylor Lautner
Yes.
in it.
Yes. It comes back to Lautner again. There we go. Yes.
I
Same
guess
year. Same year, apparently, as yeah, Shark Boy. Yeah.
yeah, I guess so. I never really put that together. I didn't realize that I'd actually seen two movies of him that came out in the same year.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Holy cow! I'm gonna have to watch it again just to see if he looked much different than he did as Shark Boy.
No, I'd say more or less the same, probably.
I mean, it would make sense, but I would imagine like maybe his hair was done differently. I don't know.
I don't know.
In any case, Cheaper by the Dozen 2 on my list of movies to watch again.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was a similar one that came out called Yours, Mine, and Ours, which I think was technically a remake of an old Lucille Ball movie. This was a version starring Dennis Quaid and Rene Russo. And basically, I guess if you want to put it in fewer words, you could describe it as like a cheaper by the dozen type family, only with like I think 50% more kids,
Hmm.
because it's a blended family of 18 kids, if I remember correctly.
Oh, right, because didn't they marry and kind of
Yeah,
combine custody of all the kids?
mm, well, sort of. Yeah, it's like they were old friends. They kind of I guess fell in love and married and kind of brought merged their two families together.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, the one with Lucille Ball, I think it ends with one of the older kids walking off to pursue being in the army or the Marines or something like that.
Um, I've never seen the original. I don't never seen that one, but I think I do know. And in this remake, I'm assuming it is. Dennis Quaid is some kind of military man, like a naval officer or something.
Okay, so there's definitely some parallels there, which would make sense if it was a remake. I don't think I've ever seen this newer one, but I do remember enjoying the original, so maybe I'll enjoy this one too.
Yeah, maybe. And taken then there was a for some reason I feel like even though the critic reviews probably weren't as good, but I feel like it still gets a lot of exposure on television and stuff.
Hmm.
It's Disney's The Pacifier, starring Vin Diesel of Fast and the Furious fame as a Navy lieutenant who is who is tasked with looking after his dead colleague's family, while some hacker type crook is kind of on the loose, looking for some top secret uh, program.
It was like a program or file or something. I think it was just called
Oh,
Ghost.
yeah, yeah. And there's a yeah, and there were definitely I'd say I don't know how much sense it really made in retrospect. I guess is the word I'm looking for, but had some good actors on it, like Brittany Snow, who not long after would appear as Amber in Hairspray, and and yeah, overall well acted, and Brad Garrett is like the vice principal of the school. Mhm. Of course, probably most everybody remembers him as Robert on Everybody Loves Raymond, and
Mhm.
yeah, and he brought more or less some comic relief to this movie, and yeah, so yeah, it was overall pretty okay.
I would definitely say so. I grew up on this movie for sure. And there were definitely some scenes I still can picture in my head almost perfectly. Emphasis on almost. I loved how the song that he used to put the younger kid to sleep was exactly what he needed to do in order to get through all the security measures to get to this ghost program file thing.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's one of my favorite things about the film. You like, it's one of those cases where um, some sort of detail or gag or whatever that you think isn't going to be that significant, or you think it's just like a throwaway or something, ends up
Mhm.
actually playing a huge role later, whether like in the climax or whatever. That's a pretty good creative foreshadowing. I appreciate the movie for that for sure.
Oh yeah, I loved the story. I loved the jokes. I definitely loved Brad Garrett's performance. Um, the fact that they had Sound of Music in this movie, which is a production I'd love to do at some point,
Oh yeah.
but for whatever reason, one scene that I remember very vividly is right around the time where they start their final fight with the bad guys, and it starts off with the duck biting one of them. There's just something I really love about that duck. It's really hard to explain, but I just loved watching it.
Oh, oh yeah, I think I liked it too. Yeah. And then let's think there was another sequel, and another Disney film, a sequel to Lilo and Stitch, Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch, with I think most of the original cast from the previous century returning, except I think they got Dakota Fanning to voice Lilo for this one, and and for my memory, a decent replacement. I don't know. Honestly, I can't decide which voice, whether the OG Davy Chase or Dakota Fanning as my favorite. I feel like it's at least a tie, but this basically, for those who don't know, it's basically there's some kind of like malfunction going on in Stitch that kind of causes him to kind of uncontrollably act up for a little bit, and and so that plays a major plot line along with another thing or two, and yeah, so I'm still decent animation, well, some pretty fun moments from what I remember, and yeah, it's overall good.
Yeah, I think the story is that they do a flashback or something showing that when Stitch was first created, he wasn't fully charged or something when he was being released or something like that, which is what causes the glitching to happen. And I think when the glitch takes place, his eyes flash green for a second, and then he acts a lot more violent for a short spurt of time. And it's like, is he isn't fully charged by a certain point, then he's just gone. Uh, that much I remember about the movie. I haven't seen that one in a long time, but I do remember that's kind of the plot of the film. I would say the second one is a bit underrated, and I'm sure that with this upcoming live action film based on the first film, there's going to be a lot of people watching the original film, watching this one, even watching the tie-in television series. And I think there was another one that kind of concluded everything. Uh,
Well, there was that one direct-to-video film that kind of served as kind of like a pilot or intro to the television series. So Stitch the movie. So
oh, that's true. I don't think I've ever seen that one, but the one I was thinking of, there was another creature that was a lot like Stitch, except he was red.
Leroy and Stitch.
Yes, that's what it was. It's like I couldn't remember the creature's name, but I definitely remember watching that one. I think it served as a finale to the Lilo and Stitch franchise, but I'm sure with this live action movie, a lot of people are going to be seeing the first one again as well as the sequel, if nothing else.
One other one on my list was it was kind of more or less kind of a very reminiscent more or less of Mary Poppins, though technically it's based on a whole nother existing book series.
Mhm.
called Nanny McPhee. Um, following a nanny pretty similar to Mary Poppins, except maybe a bit more dramatic, a bit more stern, arguably.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that one rings a bell at all.
I definitely know of it. I don't think I've ever seen it though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah. So yeah. Pretty much. A lot of, I guess, dark humor. A lot of. Well, I'd say a lot of visual effects where basically only a big part of it is she's kind of casting these pretty dramatic spells to get the kids to straighten up, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit dark. It's kind of like Mary Poppins, except darker, a bit more aggressive, probably, but it's pretty lighthearted as well at the same time. I think it's worth at least one try.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely watch it then, especially because I've watched Mary Poppins. I've acted in it before. So it'll definitely be fun to watch this one and see how many similarities there might be between the two characters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just one last one I had was a film adaptation that's not as famous or probably beloved, arguably, as its earlier 20th century counterpart, but worthy nonetheless, in my opinion, anyway. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, directed by Tim Burton and starring Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka. It was I think also I think produced by author Roald Dahl's daughter, and it was a more a more closely following take on the book of the same name by Roald Dahl, and had it retained more of like the the darker stuff and a lot of the plot lines that were mostly really omitted, I think, from the earlier films starring Gene Wilder. It made it also added an interesting original subplot involving Wonka's relationship history with his dad, which is also a good creative move, I think. Um, yeah, I feel like if you really like the book and you want something closer to it, then this is probably for you. Or if you just want to see like a different take on the old familiar story of Willy Wonka, then you might appreciate this.
Yeah, I've seen the Gene Wilder one. In fact, we've even done a musical that's
Yeah,
loosely based on the Gene Wilder one.
yeah,
Uh, I've seen the Wonka prequel that came out in recent years, which I thought was really good.
yeah,
But oddly enough, I don't think I've ever actually seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory all the way through. I've definitely seen various scenes or little snippets of them, but I don't think I've ever actually watched it from beginning to end. And now I feel like I should because I know there's a lot of people that enjoy it. And the fact that it's closer to the book makes me even more intrigued by it.
yeah, yeah. I feel like, well, like I know there's probably a bunch of like purists out there who weren't too happy with how much stuff that the older film changed, and I feel like some of them would understandably gravitate toward this one directed by Tim Burton, and I don't I don't know which one I would gravitate more toward, but I feel like this Tim Burton film is maybe a little bit underrated, and from my memory, I feel like it is at least a worthy viewing.
I would say it's definitely one of those cases where you could understand why someone would like one of them and not so much the other one. I know with a lot of remakes or similar stories, people will make comparisons and say something like, "Oh, the original one is the best one every time," or like the new one that they grew up in is obviously the better one. But based on what you're saying and based on what I know of these two different adaptations, I could definitely understand people's perspectives from either side.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might be a little bit biased because I was in the musical and I've
Sure.
actually seen the Gene Wilder one, but maybe my opinion will change when I see the Johnny Depp version.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think that's gonna do it for now. Thanks everybody for streaming, and you can keep up with us on YouTube and Spotify. Keep up with the full series. Leave your questions and comments on our YouTube comment section, as well as my Instagram, Seth_Mariano_AU. And taken, please, I'm sure whatever you have to say is worthy.
Yeah, let us know. Are you planning on seeing Revenge of the Sith when it comes back in theaters? Are there other movies from 2005 that you wish were back in theaters? Or generally speaking, what movies have you seen from 20 years ago that you still love today?
Oh, yeah, sure. And well, that's going to do it for now. And we'll see you again soon.
So long, everyone.